Hello everyone. We're going to be starting a rod building series, and this is the first video of the series. In this video we're basically going to be talking about the different components that you will need to build your own fly rod, as well as finding the spine of our rod blank. Now we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on spining a rod when we get to that point, but the first thing I'd like to go over are the different components that we will be using to build this particular rod. Okay, on the table in front of me I have the rod blank sitting here in the holder, and this particular rod blank is a Small Creek XI blank. It's an 8-foot 2-weight, and I've got this rod blank from flyrodcrafters.com. On this particular rod we're going to be placing a grip I turned from Cork Rings. The reel seat is a seat. The spacer of the seat I turned from a piece of Timbati wood, and the particular configuration of this reel seat is this is a down locking reel seat. This reel seat does not need the back of the grip inlet, as this bumps up flush with the back of the grip. And the reason I went with a down locking reel seat is an 8-foot rod for a 2-weight. I want to transition the weight of the reel as far back as possible to help balance the rod in the hand. I'll get a closer zoom up of the guides, strip guide, tip top, and wind check, so just bear with me for a moment. Okay, this particular rod we're going to be using a total of 8 snake guides, 1 stripping guide, and I have the snake guides broke out into groups by size. So there'll be 5 snake guides, that's the smallest size that the rod will be using, and then 3 additional guides going up in size as you get closer to the stripping guide. Now the stripping guide is just a basic 2-foot guide. I have a rubber wind check, and the wind check will go on the very top of the grip where the rod blank goes through the grip and comes out the front, just to give a nice clean look and to help prevent any water from getting underneath the grip. And then I have an appropriate size standard loop tip top that will go on the very tip of the rod. So the very first thing we're going to do in the rod building is we're going to find the spine of the rod blank itself. And this is a controversial topic, the spine of the rod. And do you build your rod on the spine? Do you build your rod opposite of the spine? And I just want to point out a few things here. From Sage's website, if you purchase a blank from Sage, their blanks come pre-marked with white dots for alignment purposes. And their website tells us to build the rod, well, let me just read it to you. The white dots on each section indicate the straightest axis of the blank. We recommend aligning each section dot to dot, then place the guides on the dotted line. So basically what that's telling us is Sage disregard the spine and build the straightest rod possible. And graphite rods are basically wrapped, and they are not absolutely perfectly straight. Even if you look at a carbon arrow for archery, which is also wrapped graphite, the manufacturers, even on arrows, disclose that there's a straightness tolerance plus or minus 0.005 of an inch or whatever for that particular arrow. And it just goes to show you, you're straight as an arrow, and arrows are not even perfectly straight. So you get people saying, put your guides on the spine, put your guides opposite the spine. And here you have Sage, who builds $900 rods, saying, well, we don't build on the spine, we don't build opposite the spine, we build a rod that is as straight as it possibly can be. So I find that interesting in the debates about building on a spine or not building on a spine. And again, if you go to swiftflyfishing.com, who build the Epic series of fly rods, when it comes to their instructions on using their blanks to build a rod, they talk about all the different possibilities involving the spine, building on the spine, building 180 degrees opposite the spine, building 90 degrees to the spine. But on bulletin number 3, it says, ignore the spine altogether and align the rod sections to give you the straightest, most aesthetically pleasing result or preference. This is what most of the large commercial rod manufacturers do. Yeah. Swift Fly Fishing make custom rods, high dollar rods, and they're saying they don't use the spine. And lastly, I'll go to CTS website. Now, there's conflict between CTS and Swift Fly Fishing. Swift Fly Fishing, as with other things I have read, says the spine of the rod is on the outside of the curve when you flex the rod. Now, CTS is saying that the inside of the curve is the spine of the curve. But CTS recommends putting your guides for general purpose fly rods. These are typically built with guides on the same side as the spine. The CTS spine marks indicate the inside of the curve. CTS is saying that they pre-mark their blanks. I have 2 CTS blanks sitting here, and I can tell you they are not marked. Is CTS now marking them? I don't know. I didn't order these blanks directly from CTS. I went through one of their dealers here in the United States. CTS is a New Zealand company, but mine are not marked for spine. So that was my real quick breakdown of the spine. I'm going to find the spine of this rod, and the reason being, there are no other marks on this rod. Each section of this rod, and it is a 4-piece rod, I cannot by eye distinguish a straighter side or a not straighter side. If there is a bend to it, and I'm sure there is some degree of bend in this rod, it is so minute that I am having difficulty picking it up. So I'm going to build this fly rod as CTS would say on the spine, which is according to CTS, the inside of the curve, but according to Swift, Mudhole, the spine is on the outside of the curve. I am building mine with the guides on the inside of the curve, just so we're clear. And the reason I'm doing that is this was not marked by the manufacturer for alignment purposes, and I have no other marks to base the build on. I'll bring you over real quick to how I go about spining a rod blank and marking it, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so I personally use this spining tool by CRB, and basically it is a tube I clamp down to the table that has 2 ball bearings on the inside of it, one on each end. Now, for safety reasons and to protect the rod blank, where those ball bearings make contact with this graphite blank, I have placed a little bit of masking tape over to help protect the rod blank itself. Hollow graphite tube versus the edge of a steel ball bearing. The steel ball bearing will win if there's an issue. So basically I'm going to insert the butt end of the rod section or rod blank and with the masking tape on, protecting the blank from the edges of the ball bearing, make sure that's in the right place. I'm going to flex the rod blank and putting bend in it. And now this is the butt section of the rod, so there's not a great deal of bend, but you don't need to overly bend it to find the spine, and the more you bend it, the more risk you take of damaging the blank against the edge of the steel ball bearings. And while putting the bend, I'm going to start spinning the rod blank, and you'll feel a catch, kind of like it's coming to rest in a valley where it naturally wants to rest. And to get out of that valley, there's some resistance on trying to spin it. And right there is the bottom of that valley, and this short piece of tape here is basically identifying the spine of this section of rod blank. It naturally wants to come to rest there, and to get it out or out of that position, it actually takes a little bit more effort than normal to get it starting to rotate. Once it starts rotating, it rotates just fine, but it wants to come and rest right there. So basically this indicates the spine of the rod blank. Now this piece of tape is actually what I'll be using to align the guides, which is 180 degrees from the spine of the blank. And now typically when I find the spine, I don't push down like that. I will actually push up, creating flex this way, and basically do the same procedure and the rod blank wants to naturally rest right there, and I'll mark my blank with the tag because this is the inside of the curve, or where I want to run my guides along. Again, you can tell by this short piece of tape that the spine of the blank is on the outside of the curve pointing down at the table. You want to spine each section of your rod blank if it's in multiple sections, and mark the spine of each section like I've done here. When you assemble the rod blanks, you want to line the spine up of each section.